it's still weird that you're frozen
Hello,
on my
everyone.
end.
Welcome to the... Oh, I apologize for that, guys. So, welcome to the Fluid Voice. I am your co-host, Ileana Clark.
Oh, there we go.
And I'm very fortunate to be sharing with a great conversation with our special guest, Vadim Nyquist, also known as the amazing creator of Creationist Cat. How are we doing this evening, Vadim?
You're muted, Vadim.
You're muted. You're muted. You're
On the on StreamYard, you're muted.
Okay, hello.
There
we go. Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies. Hey, I'm a boomer. So not technically, but sort of. I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me on, folks. I appreciate it and look forward to the discussion.
Amazing. And and of course, I'm very fortunate to be here with two other amazing individuals by the name of Christy and Alex. How are you doing, guys? How are you doing this evening?
You are first.
The cold hasn't killed me yet, so.
Gotcha. Well, in tonight's show, we're going to be speaking on the topic of pronouns. Now, this can be a very short topic, but I actually pulled out some really great questions that we're going to be addressing on this topic. And then as we typically do, we're going to have a round robin type of discussion. And hopefully we can share some really good prospects with the Vadim in regards to his positions on several different things. So I guess the first thing is, if someone mentions pronouns to everyone here, what does that generally refer to your guys' position on in person's intrinsic pronouns? What does that signify to you guys? Anyone's feel free to go first.
Can you restate the question? What do I feel about pronouns in general? Or
yeah. So the better way of saying is like, in someone asks you intrinsically to respect their pronouns, what does that mean to you? Like, what does pronouns mean?
Well, that's just a basic desire for respect that I think everyone should be afforded. You know, I mean, I first of all think that it's even if you happen to be someone who, which I am not, who thinks that those who label themselves a different pronoun than perhaps forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology here, they're assigned gender at birth. Even if you happen to be someone who disagrees that that's valid, it's still like, what problem is it to you to just give basic respect to this request? On top of that, I do think that it's absolutely valid. I don't think that, you know, that's not my stance, that there isn't any like actual like that there is actual scientific and other bases for recognizing it and respecting it. But I think that I mean that's basically how I look at it. I mean, when it comes to more broadly the way that I think the majority of the online people and people in general look at it, that's a different topic. But is that specific enough an answer?
That works great, Vadim. So yeah, I greatly appreciate that. So Alex and Christy, do you guys have any takes on what you consider in regards to pronouns? You know, the significance to you guys in reference to it, or?
You. Go ahead.
Oh dear God! It seems to be working.
Hello, Vadim. So Vadim, I wanted to introduce our other co-host. So Perfict was having a little bit of audio issues, but Perfict, this is Vadim and Perfict. We're having a discussion on pronouns. Just wanted to introduce you guys real quick.
I guess if I may, I'll just throw in one last thing with what I said, which is that I mean, I personally think that there's an importance to them because of the basic fact that so many people who, you know, have the desire to be called a specific pronoun, uh, they tend to be marginalized people and have higher rates of uh, depression and just a different sorts of issues that they deal with more than your typical person. And you know, I think that it's important to respect them for those reasons as well. I think that by doing so, you know, if more people were to just kind of respect these basic boundaries, then I don't know, we'd have a civilization that is less transphobic, that is less bigoted towards non-binary people in general, and hopefully they wouldn't have that stigma that causes them a certain amount of depression in the first place. So you know, just I want to throw this out there at the beginning as well. These are not kind of, in spite of the fact that I've certainly thought through these things, this is actually the first time that I've had a real discussion about these matters. So, you know, if I don't kind of formulate everything perfectly, just know that it's partially because of that. You know,
That's one of the crucial reasons.
What?
No, but I just want to say this, Vadim. So this is one of the reasons why it's we're very fortunate to have you on. Is that's one of the reasons why we have these type of events every Sunday,
Sure.
is to have such discussions so we can hear other people's perspectives on the subject we cover. So I actually do agree with you that if we did promote see, one of my favorite sayings is identity matters. It's a great facet, and the reason why I believe this is a very important phrase or characteristics to promote is if we generally, like you mentioned, respect an individual's intrinsic identity to the point in where we understand where they're coming from, even if we can't directly correlate with their experiences, but we can at least empathize with such identity. I think that generally humanity would be better off in regards to perspectives of treatment and respect. But if that kind of like adds on to what you were saying.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Very well said.
So I want to give, like as always, with our roundtable, Vadim. So perfect. So I know you just came in, so I wanted to just rephrase the question. So the question, perfect, was, what do you believe in regards to pronouns? Like, why do you think it's important, or what is the facet of pronouns in regards to your own perspective? So if you want to answer, or Christy or Alex, I mean, who wants to go?
I want to go because.
I'll go.
Oh, darn.
Go ahead, perfect.
Yeah, you just got here.
Me go? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that the pronouns are important, and I'm willing to work with anybody on the pronouns that they need or want. The they, them I don't like a lot because I feel it as being a backward step in language. It's making it less specific because you don't really use it as a singular. You use it in place of a singular. There being a difference because you never can say things like, you know, they is running fast. That doesn't make sense. So you aren't using it as one, you're using it in place of one. And it is a move-in language like it's the Orwellian, what was his thing with the 1984?
So can't you say they? Can't you just say they are, or is that? I mean, I guess that.
Yeah, except that gets into in specific language is the problem.
Well, I mean, we use a lot of.
It is ambiguous, and it makes for clumsy language and heavily reconstructed sentences to make that work, which that's not a language, that's not a direction that language moves. Spoken language doesn't become more complicated that way. And that means that you're trying to force something instead of just going with a natural trend of language. And for instance, Ms. Ms was totally alien and nobody liked it and it seemed awkward, but it was a real thing. It's an issue. And it was introduced and now it's not a hiccup for anyone.
Real quick,
So
Perfect.
introducing something like Zim or something is a better route for language, in my opinion. But that doesn't seem to be the way the trend is going. So I'll just work with that and get people the pronouns they need.
Yeah, so real quick, Perfect, and I respect what you just said. I just wanted to add this. So Vadim, like when it comes to this form of setup, you're more than welcome to address any questions. Like I said, this is a free-from discussion. So if you have any questions or anything you want to address in regards to anything that anyone here has said, feel free to address it. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, but so Perfect. Let me ask you a question. So in your opinion, until we can find more, I guess a good way to be fair about it is more precise language. Is that kind of where you're getting at? Like more precision?
Or something where people could go with, like Zim has been floated as a neutral form of pronoun. And so just using that, I understand some people feel that they don't like that in particular. It doesn't strike their ear well. They don't know how to spell it. Is it a Z or an X? So on. But other than those objections, so just using it as a generic pronoun, it would be a better route in my opinion, but it isn't the route that people are heading in. And I'm not trying to force a pronoun they don't like on them.
Yeah. So, so make sure where I'm getting what you're saying. So basically, you just feel like there needs to be more precision in regards to the pronouns. You don't want to enforce it on others, and you feel that an alternative could be Z or Zim, kind of like that. Correct?
Yes. It also enters the Jordan Petersons of the world. I don't want to blame him entirely, but the people who do the, but how will I know what to?
Uh-oh.
What happened?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Sorry, everyone watching. I have no idea. I have no idea. He'll be back. I apologize for anybody watching. Perfect has sometimes connection issues, so I apologize to anybody who is watching. But we'll just continue the conversation real fast to Alex and Christy. So, what is your guys' interpretation of what I mean by pronouns? And he's back.
Okay.
So real quick, so we can move on real quick. Perfect. Yeah. So Alex and Christy, do you guys have any takes on in regards to your intrinsic opinions on pronouns?
Yeah. So so obviously there are some basics for pronouns like I, you, he, she, but like it, they. Like people seem to think like pronouns are some special thing. It's basic English. But I mean, it's also just descriptions. It's how you see yourself is how you describe yourself. And what pronoun you use is whatever fits that. But like in terms of the they conversation, like I don't see the reason for the importance of specificity unless you're calculating the number of people, or if you're like I saw Christy. Like if I were to say, not to totally. Let's say someone was talking about me and they were like, "Hey, I saw Alex. They were going to the store." Like, people aren't going to be confused of, like, oh, do you mean, like, multiple Alex? Even though you mentioned one person? Like, there are plenty of circumstances where it's not confusing. I don't know.
Well,
So go ahead, Christy, please. And then I'll add what I was going to ask. Go ahead, but please.
I know you always have Alex from Clockwork Orange in the back of your head, so...
Oh.
it made it possible.
Okay, just go full Alexandria. There, go full part of their first name. Don't. If you start thinking of Clockwork Orange, that's far from me.
Can I say something real
Good
quick?
music
Of course,
taste.
Vadim.
Go
It's an
on.
open forum. Feel free.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that there's no way to avoid a situation where, because the fact that even though that trans and certainly also non-binary people have existed for a very long time,
Centuries.
they're still in terms of just ordinary discourse within people who are not within those communities. It's a relatively new thing. I mean, I guess the just the topic of pronouns in general is a relatively new thing. So you're not going, no matter what the new term that you're asking people to come up with, or not come up with, but to respect, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be people who find it odd right off the bat,
or acceptable right away.
yeah. And some of that is probably genuinely due to real
I don't know.
like transphobia, whatever your label for bigotry, and sometimes it's just purely because people are not kind of accustomed to these things and just need to be kind of more familiar with it all. I know a lot of people who have completely done 180s on this topic in a short period of time, and so
Yeah, so I think this goes into the very first question from this paper from the ACLU that I think it's a very good question to ask. But why aren't people's pronouns more obvious? That's one of the first questions. So I guess one of the best ways to approach it. So I'll repeat it one more time. So since Perfict wasn't here and he's back. So the question again, Perfict, is why aren't people's pronouns more obvious? So anybody is welcome to answer that, whoever wants to go first.
Do you mean obvious in terms of why aren't people why aren't they sort of announced? Why aren't they attached to
Correct.
someone?
That's the question.
Or okay, yeah, you don't mean like visually, like
No.
why don't I recognize? Yeah, okay. I figured that's where you were going with it, but
so basically I'm going to read here. So the question comes from, and I'll link it to everyone here so you guys can check out what I'm looking at. There's already answers here, but give me a second so you guys can see that. Give me one moment.
In general, on the first question, since I have a trans child and we came out fairly close together, my child first, so female to male, in my case, male to female.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-wife took to just calling us both they for ages, and we have finally had to sit her down and say, boy, girl, he, her. It was because it became uncomfortable, but there's now a non-binary person in the house, so had to get used to saying they all over again, which is great. I mean, I like being called she. It startles me sometimes still, because I'm old.
Yeah, so I think that's an important point to make, Christy, because one of the things that I see personally in regards to my own experiences, especially in the community I live in, is a lot of the people don't understand that, if you base your someone's identity based on their pronouns outside of their perspective, just from outward appearance, that could be problematic because you don't know if that individual can be non-binary, could be transgender individual, and that's one of the things that, in my opinion, it's incredibly important to try to show as much respect and conveys that respect as much as possible to the individual. I guess so. Let me rephrase this question in a better way. So I also want to mention, Vadim and everyone here, that I linked it in the chat section of the meetup, so you can look at what I'm looking at. So the question goes, and I apologize if I read it incorrectly, but aren't people's pronouns obvious? That was the actual question. So I apologize for asking the wrong question. So what's your guys' answer to that?
Should I go first?
Feel free, Vadim, please. You're a guest.
It seems to me that they're not that obvious because they may usually be obvious because most people, I guess, fit into certain paradigms, but you don't know, and people express their genders in all different ways, and I, I I don't know. When because can you repeat the question one more time? Because there was something. Yeah.
So the question is, but aren't people's pronouns obvious? That's the question.
So yeah. So the other thing that I would say to that is that no, absolutely. Another reason why they're not is because of the fact that in terms of, I mean, again, they're within, I would say, and you guys would probably be better, like basically what I'm saying is, let me know if you think I'm wrong, but from my point of view, being a cis hetero male, someone who has always been within the LGBTQ community, yet I have not I have been kind of out of the fray somewhat because I live in a small town. But at least I have the past few years. I think that people are not accustomed just yet to pronoun usage. It's still a relatively new thing in terms of popular discourse. And so these are all reasons why it's not something that people either accept as much as they should, or that is as obvious to some. Just a lot of people just don't use it, adopt it.
Yeah, so if I can just mention this real quick, Vadim. So I actually made this comment about a couple weeks back. I actually did a piece talking about the historical prospects of the concepts of gender across history. And one of the things that amazed me, a lot of people don't know this, so the history of the very first transgender individual here in the United States is pretty well known. They had, I forgot her name. I apologize, but I actually did an entire video, and I'm kind of embarrassed. But one of the things if you watch,
no,
thank you. Yes. No, that wasn't her. But if you look at the reel that they were doing on when she first came back from Europe in regards to her transition and post-op, one of the things that you notice is a lot of the reporters, a lot of the individuals, and again, this is 1954. They were using the appropriate pronouns for this individual. They were calling her she. They were respecting her pronouns. And I agree that maybe it is somewhat conceptualized, somewhat new in regards to discussions today, but I also somewhat disagree because we have seen implications throughout history for the last 200-300 years. I can show you evidence of this, and where people, in regards to the different cultures on how they derive their concepts of gender, have used specific pronouns in the basis of those individuals.
Sure, I'm aware that there are cultures that have kind of had variations of this, or exactly what we're talking about. I'm just talking about in terms of popular discourse.
Of course.
I and that article that you cite may be an anomaly, but I think that very, very quickly, somewhere, certainly by the 60s, 70s, 80s, these sorts of things. I mean, especially I'll be honest. I wasn't even aware of the I had heard of kind of I don't know, cultural, like Greek myths talking about things that I think that are akin to non-binary people and whatnot, but I was not aware of non-binary people's and I feel horrible saying that. It certainly wasn't. It wasn't. But it's just sheer ignorance.
But Vadim, you shouldn't feel bad about that at all. I mean, if you don't have a background in history, you shouldn't feel guilty or bad at all. I mean, here's why I think why you should feel guilty is because, like, for example, in regards to different cultures, it's only fair that if you are focused on looking at history or anthropology or cultural
Sure.
studies, then it would be understandable that you would have to have some basic understanding of these
Sure.
concepts.
To clarify, I don't feel guilty per se, because I tend to only feel guilt for things that I've actually done and, should understandably be taken. I should be I should take responsibility for.
Mhm.
But the reason why I guess I have a reflexive admittance of feeling bad about is because I know that these people have always existed, yet they, I wish that their existence was more well known, because certainly if I had known about it, and I think a lot of others had, they would kind of have a more of a leg up than they do now, in terms of cultural acceptance. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's what I mean. Like I
Of
don't
course.
actually feel like a bad person for
Good,
it. I
good.
just feel like the circumstance is unfortunate.
Yeah, just for me, I don't think I just don't. I wouldn't beat up someone or make. I wouldn't expect them to feel bad not knowing this bit of knowledge on every single facet. You know what I mean? I just want to be fair to you. Real quick, so I also Christy and Perfict and Alex, did you guys have any comments on this question? But aren't people's pronouns obvious? Do you guys have any takes on that?
Well, one of the things that I encounter is you'll have somebody who's trans and they can be trans femme and still be non-binary, and trans masc and still be non-binary.
Mhm.
So you're never you can't assume about a lot of people. I mean, me, I'm pretty easy. I'm binary, whatever. But yeah, the first the first time I encountered a non-binary person as non-binary was a friend of mine who was just about to go in for a mastectomy.
Wow.
And she told me about it. She was sitting with her father. Like, I knew all the terminology, which I didn't. It was just before a gig, so my brain is elsewhere anyway. And my basic response was, "Good luck. I hope it works for you." And then we had a good 5 minutes on how she couldn't afford nipples. So they couldn't afford nipples. See, I screwed it up right there. And sorry, I screw up pronouns all the time, including my own.
Yeah, everyone. That's the thing.
That's
like,
actually going to go into another question that we're going to.
Yeah, I was gonna say everyone screws up
No,
pronouns.
go ahead, Alex, please.
But also,
So
yeah, I don't know. I think it's there's been a lot of focus on I think the archaic mentality that has built up America. Well, not just America, fucking a lot of the Western world. But like, actually, a lot of the world in general has like a focus on, ability to reproduce and like some basic stuff like that, and physical prowess, and yeah, I think that's how people can end up in this attitude where it's just like these two possibilities, even though
well, most of the time, people's pronoun preferences will be obvious, and you will make an assumption about them, and you'll probably be right. But that doesn't mean you get to always be right, and that it's a personal pronoun preference. It's their preference. The best you could possibly do is take a guess. So they're never going to be really actually obvious. There is no tell from the outside.
And so what I was going to ask is, So what is everyone? So there's a big discussion I've been seeing about what is the appropriate pronoun to use to an individual that generally you would not know of someone. What do you consider to be for example, let's say you have a third party, you have never had an interaction with this individual, and you want to at least try to respect or try to. I don't like to use the word guess, but figure out what their appropriate pronouns are. Like, what do you guys consider to be an appropriate pronoun to use until you get some form of clarification on what they prefer to be referred as? If that makes sense, is in reference to my question.
I talk about people behind their back all the time, but usually you can switch around the sentences without being awkward, to use they, because that they is what you use when you don't know.
Alex, Vadim, Perfect. Do you guys generally share those sentiments, or?
Should I go or should you? Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
So, they in the English language has traditionally been used. If you don't know, I agree with that. You can also, depending on the conversation and how long you expect it to be, you can not use pronouns for the person. Like, yeah.
No, please continue, Alex. I apologize.
I'm having a conversation with Vadim, Christy, Abbey, and Perfict. There are no pronouns in that sentence. Oh, I've talked with Vadim. What do you think about that person? Like, it depends on what sort of conversation you're having and what you can get away with and what you feel comfortable with. And also,
it
I overthink
in your
things.
Opinion of context.
Well, it's just like, in terms of talking about people behind their back, to some degree, it's about preference. But gotcha. Just in terms of what you asked, what you can do, those are the two things I could think of.
So, and real quick, I want to give Perfect. Did you have any take on in regards to this, or
in regards to whether or not?
Yeah, what is the appropriate first? If you have an
first blush, I'd say generally, you hedge your bets and then you take a guess, just like you always have to, and wait to be corrected. But the thing is to just take direction. If somebody directs you towards some pronouns,
please,
that's it.
Vadim, of course, feel free to.
I'm sorry. I feel like I talked over Perfect. Do you want to finish what you were saying?
No. I just did.
I mean, I would hope that anyone in the, who happens to have pronouns that are different than most, that they would have a good detector. I mean, there are times when people misgender others and it's completely obvious that they're doing it for malicious reasons. And unless someone is kind of exhibiting behavior that really, this is how I would approach it if I had these, pronouns that were different than he, him. I would, or no, that's how I approach it, as how I approach it anyway. Unless someone is being just deliberately a jerk, usually detectable, not always, then I would give them some sort of leeway and then politely correct them. I can understand how perhaps someone who it does not have has alternate pronouns to what I use, or it just uses they, them, or what have you, might feel a little bit dysphoric or aggravated by that. But just because of the fact that both because of the fact that it's a different it's a different experience than most people, and because of the fact that we're still kind of in like a new, for lack of a better word, like a new time period where there's a general acceptance of these things, that yeah, I would hope that people would exercise that sort of discretion. Does that make sense?
So
yeah.
I actually agree with you. And so, see, for me, I think context is incredibly important. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you have an individual that generally makes specific rhetoric or does a certain form of discourse that is exclusionary in policy toward a specific demographic of people, and then when they use a certain pronoun, I would easily ascribe that that person is doing that intentionally for malicious intent. Now, when
Yeah.
it comes to other context, I also agree with Perfict that when it comes to the pronouns, if it's a measure that someone has to do to take the step forward to make sure that they get the right pronouns in reference to the usage toward that individual. So it's a two-way road. So
Can I say something from personal experience, which
please.
I think is actually very interesting. I somewhat recently, like maybe about 4 months ago, somewhere around there, decided to add my pronouns to my bio on Twitter. I had not done so earlier, only because I just it's a relatively new thing for me, and I had lots of friends who had done it, and I just kind of thought about it, and I was like, well, I kind of want to give people the signal that I'm as welcoming, that I am like an ally, if you will. But one thing that I didn't think about, which is actually, I'm actually glad, even though that in some ways it's a little aggravating. I can't tell you how many idiots on Twitter I'll chime in on something and they will say like, oh, uses pronouns in their bio, opinion discarded.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yes, and it's actually, for the most part, a pretty good detector of whether I think that's a garbage person or not. I mean,
well, tell me if this is fair, Vadim.
Okay,
It's a form of deflection. It's a form of bad faith talking point. So, in my opinion, when someone uses this form of deflection, they don't really care about what you're actually promoting. They don't actually care about actual discourse. They generally do this because they want to paint you with some form of pejorative. So anyone who sees this discussion on social media can already hand wave as well anything that you may say that may be relevant or even rational. And I don't know.
Absolutely. And I want to add like a very small caveat to when I say that these are garbage people, because by and large, I mean, I'm always curious when this occurs, and I will look at the bios and I'll either see evidence of them being extremely turfy, or often they're like literally alt-right. They're like, they've got Nick Fuentes just retweeted several times. I guess he's off Twitter now technically, but no, he's still on Twitter, not on YouTube. But every now and then I will see someone who, I'm not saying that by looking at their feed looks like super open-minded, but every now and then I do see someone who looks like, okay, maybe this is someone who has just been kind of, maybe one day will be okay with it. Like they seem progressive on certain things. Maybe they've been conditioned to think these things. I'm ascribing too much respect to a very small amount of these people. But the reason why I say that is that I do know some people who were absolute shitheads on this topic just 1 or 2 years ago, and have issued very sincere apologies in either videos or within tweets, saying like, hey, this is something that was very foreign to me, and now I get it. So I do think that there is a small amount of people like that, but for the most part, when people do that, you know that they have some sort of really awful bias, and no matter what, I do agree with you that they are trying to kind of hand wave away the points that you're making. 90% of the time, the things that I'm saying don't even have anything to do with issues having to do with, I don't know, trans issues or non-binary stuff.
Yeah. So I want to be very clear though. So see, with my position, when they do this, it's not specifically that this is not them actually doing the hand wave or the deflection themselves. They're already doing that by adding in the pejorative. But when they add in this pejorative, it's for it's kind of like a signal or a form of boosting toward their viewers or toward their audience of also, oh, you should just hand wave this away, or you can just or just discard what these individuals are saying because I'm deeming them irrational from my perspective. I also was going to mention who I forgot this individual's name, but what is this? You ever heard of Hunter Avalon? Have you heard of this individual?
Yes.
See, like, is that kind of who you were kind of like referring that, like that type of individual? Like, I seen a discussion between him and Vosh about a month ago, and where Hunter is he's still a paleo-conservative. He still has some pretty bad takes, in my opinion.
I don't think he's quite a paleo-conservative, but he's definitely a conservative.
Yeah, you're right.
Paleo-conservative is a little more to the right than I believe he actually is.
Fair enough. Yeah. But you get what I'm saying. Is that kind of like who you were talking about, like an example of someone that's progressing?
It can be someone like that. It can also, I mean, Hunter Avalon is someone, he's a very interesting fellow because, to me, because I think that I think he's made genuine changes. Some people may disagree, and he will admit, and I certainly think, that a lot of his videos are garbage. A lot of those videos have been taken down. But he in that Vouch discussion that you're talking about, he says that he felt cringy about videos that he had made just 2 or 3 months prior to the discussion that they had, maybe even closer to that. So there are people like that, but I think that there's also people like, I mean, these aren't people exclusively on the right necessarily. There are some who I identify politically as left leaning. There are some people who are even within the I say unfortunately because I think it sucks that there are people who are in the LGBTQ, because those all should be allies, but there are people in the LGBTQ community who also sometimes fall into those categories, and not just people like your Ariel Scarcellas and Blair Whites, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've talked for a bit, and I don't want to hog the mic.
So I wanted to ask this. So this is the last question I'm going to ask on the topic up front, because I think we did a good coverage. I also want to give everyone the opportunity to add in anything they want in reference to this. But my only last question I want to ask is, what do you guys consider? I would love to get everyone's perspective on this. What do you believe is the best avenue that we can do to help people understand that, if you run into an individual that says, oh, I'll never use pronouns, or you'll never compel me to use someone's pronouns outside of my perspective, what is a way that you guys think is a good way to try to convince, or maybe that's too strong of a word, maybe convey the importance of respecting other people's pronouns? What do you think is a good way to convey that type of message? If that makes any sense, what I'm trying to say. Does that kind of make sense? Like,
yeah,
what is
it makes sense.
Absolutely.
What do you think would be a solution?
Well, my reaction would be I totally agree with them that they shouldn't be compelled to use anybody's pronouns, but they ought to feel compelled to use people's pronouns simply out of respect for the other person.
I agree with that. Anybody else? Real quick, Perfect. I want to get you. Do you have, like, if there was a situation in where you were having like a discussion with someone on this topic, what do you think would be a good way for you maybe to convey to them the importance of why they should respect an individual's pronouns. I mean, like, what do you think would be a good solution for that?
Well,
Probably-
it's that person's identity, that person, and what they're choosing to identify with and as.
Mhm.
It isn't about what you choose to identify them as. It's about their identity and what they choose to identify as.
So you would basically just like have it, like try to have it. Go ahead, Alex. Go.
Yeah, so I would the only thing I have in terms of thoughts on it is that it's I mean, yes, it's the descriptors somewhat like, you know, people refer to themselves as chefs or writers or entertainers or cooks, but what people mean by them is sometimes different, and there needs to be, once you start going down the avenue of getting too obsessed with hardline reasons for things start to break down pretty hardcore, and that's where my difficulty comes in, because sometimes you have turf arguments that break down into like absolutes. This is how someone was, and this is how they always will be. And I mean, that entire attitude is just not helpful.
Gotcha, Alex. And what about you, Christy? What do you think? Do you have any ideas or solutions on hopefully maybe to convey why it's important for individuals to respect others' pronouns? Do you have any like ideas of how you would address an individual who refuses? Or
mostly this is an escalation, where initially I'll just correct the pronouns, and then they'll go, I don't believe in that, and then I say, well, fine that you don't believe in that, but you know, respect me as a human being. And then they go, oh, well, I don't have to because it's biologically unsound or something like that. And by this time I'm already telling them to fuck off. But usually usually what I'll do is I'll just start using the wrong pronoun for them.
So kind of like a mixed direction or reverse psychology type of situation.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. And Vadim, of course, I want to give you the last opportunity. I mean, what do you think would be a possible solution to hopefully address this issue?
I think that, I mean, there's probably more constructive ways than I would put forward, but I agree with Christy that kind of showing the ridiculousness of their lack of willingness to, you know, call you the pronoun that they are comfortable with. I mean, how would these people like it if you constantly refer to them as fuckface or dipshit? You know, I mean, it's what.
Oh,
I mean, I'm not saying do that, but what?
No. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So like the problem I have with that in general is I don't. Chances are they're going to outlast you, because there aren't enough people doing it for them to matter enough, and like a lot of people will just weather through it and then like forget about it.
Sure, but can I clarify?
Of course.
Because I mean, you know, let's say that you're in a workplace situation. Probably a tactic like that is not going to be that productive. However, you know, it all depends on what kind of conversations this person is willing to hear out, because you know, I think if you didn't necessarily call them that, but said like, hey, look at it from my perspective, how would you like it, or how would you like it if I were to call you this, or how would you like it if someone were to call your daughter this, or your mother this, and they were just inflexible about this. I have a friend on YouTube who has a channel called One Species.
I know who that is.
yeah, I think they're a very underrated channel. Shout out to them. They're awesome. But they also use sort of a similar scenario in which, let's say that you happen to be white or you happen to be a person of color, and someone is constantly referring to you, even let's say that they are referring to you as what you are. Okay, like if somebody in a workplace was constant who well, I mean, it would probably feel stranger if they were not white, but if somebody was constantly, hey white guy, hey white guy, now, like, I'm not really going to feel that oppressed, but I'm gonna feel like you're being an asshole. And it, same thing with a person of color. Like I'm sure that a person of color is going to get very, like, they're going to start feeling like a second class citizen if you keep on calling them, hey black, hey you blackie, come over, and I don't know if you can have conversations of that sort where you are kind of doing sort of thought experiments with these people, and saying, imagine if you are in this scenario. This is how you make people feel if you insist on using pronouns that they don't want you to use. I don't think it's I mean, you guys let me know if you think that comparison is that off mark.
Well, if I can just add something. So sure. Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, Christy was how about you? You haven't talked for a bit, Christy. You were gonna say something too.
Well, it's just one of those funny things because I've been mistaken for Irish most of my life, so I'm Hispanic, and it actually got under my skin for a long time. Being told I'm Irish. No, I'm pretty proud Hispanic.
Portuguese represent.
Portuguese represent.
But yeah, oh, go on. Were you done?
No, I wanted to add this real quick, and this is actually going off of what you were saying, Vadim, and I actually understand what you're getting at. I don't agree with it completely, and here's why I don't agree with it. And tell me if this is fair. The reason why I don't agree with it is one of the problems I see is you're gonna, like Alex mentioned, you're gonna run into people that are gonna be completely stubborn. They're gonna be completely not level-headed. They don't care about discourse. They don't care about interaction. They're all about angst. They're all about anger. So for me, if you are going to be starting off using these type of indicators of calling them, hey, the white guy, or hey, the black guy, whatever as form, for me, one of the issues I see that can come up is if you run into an individual that has this aggressive tendency, you're going to make them go more into the defensive.
Right. Which is why I say don't do it necessarily, but if you can have a conversation with them in which you pose a thought experiment where you say, can you imagine how you would feel if this is the way that you were addressed constantly? You wouldn't like it. And
I agree.
And you know what? There was a time in America where black, where people were called like, "Hey, black boy," and things like that. Worse terms than that, of course. So I don't think it's that far off from reality. I don't think it's something. I think most people who aren't completely unempathetic can, at least if you pose that to them, start to process that. So yes, I agree with you. Don't actually do it in like it's certainly like a real setting. I don't know if you're talking to someone on Twitter, maybe different rules apply, but I'll hand it over to others.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Vadim. So go ahead, Alex. What are you going to say?
Okay, so the thing I was going to say is I'm not sure. I'm not sure about. I think posing it as put yourself in their shoes directly is. I don't think that always works depending on the stubbornness of the person. But that being said, I really like your idea of what if like I always called your mother that, or refer to your mother that way in terms of pronouns? I think that that seems like it's a bit more effective, or your daughter or whatnot. That just because a lot of times people will just like very quickly hand wave it. If it's about them, they'll be like, yeah, I could deal with it. It's not like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, that sort of thing, and not like really think about it.
Go ahead, please, Vadim, please.
Sure. I was just going to say that I think that there's two major hurdles to deal with. And the first hurdle is just getting people to accept the social aspects of it. And then the next hurdle is getting people, and sometimes these things go hand in hand, but getting people to accept that these are actually valid. I mean, really, ideally we want people not just to do it because they feel kind of socially compelled to do it, but also because they recognize that these statuses are valid, that people that this is not a figment of their imagination or something like that. And unfortunately, because of the fact that these are new topics to some people, and then also because of a lot of disinformation that is put out there, mostly, not all, but mostly by right-wing reactionaries. Those things are right now, they're an issue.
Well, tell me, if I could just say this, Vadim, tell me if I'm bouncing off this, if the sentiments are shared here. But I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is we need to try to invoke others' empathy in regards to sharing the experience of these type of situations. I don't know, maybe do you agree or disagree with that?
I think empathy is the first constructive thing that you can jump to if you're getting some sort of resistance to these things. I think that's the probably the most constructive. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not thinking of something else, but I think that's the most constructive go-to. And then maybe there's other tactics. It's not a one size fits all thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think that being abusive is necessarily the way to go, but I'm spitballing here, but there could be some situations where people are being completely obnoxious, and you're basically telling them you're basically telling them to fuck off, and maybe somewhere down the road that will marinate and click with them. I don't know.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give everyone, because we are going into our free roam discussion on the second half of the show, Vadim. So thank you so much, guys, for covering the topic of pronouns. I want to give everyone a chance real quick.
Do you mind if it would be great if I could just very quickly grab a cup of coffee? And...
of course, Vadim. Of course. Feel free.
Okay, awesome. I'll be right back.
Of course. So I wanted to give everyone an opportunity while Vadim's getting good coffee. Do you guys have anything last to say on the topic of pronouns that you guys wanted to mention that maybe we didn't convey yet? I wanted to give everyone a chance. Perfect. Alex or Christy? Please, Perfect.
Yeah, this is part of the big selling point of the ZZIM, is that it's when you are talking with someone in a medium like Twitter or something where their gender identity has not become part of your exchange yet, even in person, when that's the case, you can always default to the ZZIM. And for those people who are doing, as I was saying, the Jordan Peterson, I don't want to, what do I do? How can I avoid, mispronouncing people? You say, just stick to the ZZIM, you'll be fine. It's non-gendered, it is doesn't comment on their gender identity.
One of the one of the things I encountered on Twitter was, or I encounter fairly frequently on Twitter, are people who say that I'm only doing this out of politeness, as if this is a boon that they are bestowing upon you that they can take back at any time. And I try to argue how that isn't. I don't have a good argument yet for how that it's more of a human rights issue. It's not as much. It's not as much a you issue, but as long as they're. I mean, I went 3 days with one guy. I'm very patient.
Real quick, so I want to make sure, Alex, did you? What about you, Alex? Did you have anything last to say about pronouns? Anything that we didn't cover?
So wait. Well, I just had a few side things to say. One, I agree conceptually with you, Perfect, but like I don't. Language oftentimes has its basis in society, and things will change and move in whatever weird way it does, and there isn't really a way to. It's not like it's not like it would be forced or anything, but like there's so many other things I feel like people don't accept culturally that I'm just like I'm not sure, although I might be going like full centrist Democrat with that sort of attitude. And also I have fun making snarky comments on Twitter, and hopefully with some of that complete rebuttals to people who are just trying to shit on me on sorry, not Twitter, Twitch. When people shit on me on Twitch, hopefully my snarky replies, if they're clever enough, it might help.
Welcome back. Yeah, real quick. Alex, we're just giving the wrap up on the topic of pronouns. We wanted to give everyone a shot. Real quick, Perfect. In reference to what Alex has said, do you have anything that you want to mention, or are you good?
Oh, we can roll on.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure everyone has a fair take on their chance to reply or anything. So again, thank you guys very much for covering the topic thing. So this is our second segment of the show, and we'll have open discussion on anything. And since you guys have been kind enough to approach the topic that I wanted to cover this week, I want to give this opportunity to either Christy, Perfict, or Alex to ask any question, as long as Vadim is willing to, kind of have an open floor discussion. I only have one request, Vadim. Can we see your cat? Can we see Creationist cat?
Well, Cece is in a different part of the house right now. Cece is getting on in
age.
The age. So I don't generally bring him on on cam when he's around, because he I prefer for him to kind of be remembered when he was in his prime.
Gotcha.
And he likes to hang out. This is a rather large house, and he likes to hang out in one room in particular, which is way over there.
What cat is that?
And that right there, this is an awesome cat named Wizard, and Wizard actually had a I'm really glad that this little guy is around, because he's only 4 years old, but about like a little over a month ago, or maybe a little under a month ago, he had a life-threatening, like all of a sudden a life-threatening condition that he had. I mean, I won't go way into it, but he had a kidney problem, and all of a sudden he just wasn't his normal self. We brought him to the vet, and literally it was a situation where if we had brought him in a few hours later, he probably would not have made it. But they showed us a picture of his kidneys, and they looked like a freaking like a water balloon that was about to burst.
So did they find out what was going on with the cat? Or was it like?
Yeah, he has a problem that a lot of male cats have, which is that if he's not on a pH balanced diet, he produces, when stressed, sort of the equivalent of gallstones, these sort of crystals.
Gotcha.
And that had built up in his system, and unfortunately he's okay. Their prognosis at first was dim, but he's back to his normal self now.
Gotcha.
And let's see if I can. There he is. He's licking his junk. But until recently, I did not have. If you notice, there are a couple of what do you call them? Litter boxes in this room. I didn't have litter boxes in my own room until recently, but they're just for him, so that he has more places to go. But yeah, he's a real chill guy.
Awesome.
We have a lot of cats here. We have like 5 cats.
So you're like a cat person, like Dusty is a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Also,
thank you for answering my question, Vadim.
I love animals of all kinds, but we only have cats here.
I feel like we have the same. The thing you're drinking out of, I feel like we have the same thing. Like, I don't know.
It's a Campbell's. I don't even know why.
Yeah.
It's a Campbell's soup mug.
Yeah,
and I guess you're supposed to drink soup out of it, eat soup out of it.
If we don't have it, at the very least,
soup.
Yeah. We had it at our house at some point. Maybe it was when I was living with my parents. I can't remember for sure. Yeah. Shit. I'd have to leave to go and well. Now I want to, if that's okay.
So real quick, yeah, go for it, Alex.
Okay.
So while you're doing that, we can give opportunity. Christy, Perfict, did you guys have any questions that if Vadim was kind enough, he'd be willing to answer for you guys?
Yeah, I'm open to anything. Go for it.
Christy. No.
The only question I have, because I didn't get an answer from you on Twitter way back when.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it happens. It's people don't see it. It's fine. When you had to evacuate the house, did all the cats go with you?
Oh, you're talking about a few years ago when we had that hurricane.
I remember that.
Yeah, they did come with us, and it was, I mean, that whole experience was very stressful, but especially that aspect of it was extra stressful because they were contained in a completely different area than where we were, and we were only allowed to go see them at certain times, and they were in these relatively small cages, and there were all these dogs and cats around, so they were fucking spooked. They did not know what was going on, and I think it's the longest period of time that any of them, I mean, maybe there were a couple that we got from pet shops, but even when we adopted them, I don't think that they were in cages as confining as that. So that was really tough to see them like that. I was very saddened by that.
Real quick, I wanted to say this, Vadim. I think Alex wants to do like a virtual mug shot with you.
Yeah,
I think you might have a different one of the.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same sort of.
Although
like branding, but there's certainly some. Yeah, I
think it's a different type
some similarities.
Although I don't know if
does it say Campbell's on it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right there. Well. Yeah. I think we might have had both of them at some point, and then one of them broke. For all I know, I honestly don't remember.
So,
I have to duck out for a minute.
Okay.
Myself. So.
Are you also grabbing a Campbell soup?
No, I'm not. I don't.
We're
have
not
one.
sponsored.
I have a night. If anybody else has a Nightmare Before Christmas thing, but I have.
Oh shit, we
I
might
did a
have
while
that
ago.
too. Oh no, no, I'm not gonna go
So,
back and forth too
I,
much.
I will be back in a minute. Enjoy purple naked ladies behind me. So.
So Vadim, I guess, hey, Perfect. Did you have any questions for Vadim?
No, not really. I really didn't.
Gotcha.
Have any.
No problem. No problem. So I
Well,
guess go ahead,
can
Vadim,
I-
please.
I'd like, I'd like to kind of pivot back to the conversation that we were having before. We
Sure.
mentioned Jordan Peterson a little bit, but I think he's a very important figure in this entire discussion because I think that when Jordan Peterson entered the fray, there was a level, and maybe there were some people who have more respect than say your Blair Whites or your basic YouTube shitlords, but he was the first person in popular right-wing discourse that I know of. Maybe Ben Shapiro, maybe I guess you could say Milo Yiannopoulos, but even these people have less respect than someone like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was a real game changer for that entire discussion because he brought that whole discussion to a broader audience and he legitimized kind of the fear mongering of this stuff, of that stuff,
Bill
more
C-16.
than yeah, exactly. Oh, totally.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that we can actually have a quick little. Actually, I'm very interested on this, Vadim. So, in reference to Jordan Peterson, like I have my takes. I'm pretty sure everyone. I'm Perfect. I'm pretty sure you have your. I've had discussions with Perfect about Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you remember those, Perfect. A few months ago, remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many discussions with you about.
So let's go into this. Actually, this is a great discussion. So, in reference to Jordan Peterson, one of the things that made him have built his notoriety, as if anybody doesn't know, watching this later on, is Bill C-16. He completely mischaracterized the bill itself. I mean, as much as people can watch this later to have a disdain for or liking of Dusty Smith, he did correlate this incredibly well. That when it comes to how Jordan Peterson presented C-16, one of the things that shows him to be a hypocrite is there were laws in place during that time, 5 years prior to him perpetuating this myth at a province level or a state level, as I guess Canada has provinces, if I remember correctly. So I don't know. Do you guys remember anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, not only that, there have been laws on the books that are basically. I mean, these are basically rather Bill. Excuse me, Bill C-16 is just a broadening of human rights
Protections.
or anti-discrimination protections that all other classes enjoy, and you know. It's weird. There was this one. Maybe you guys are familiar with it. There was this conversation that was got popularized on the internet where Jordan Peterson started crying because of the kind of responses that he gets on the internet, and he started talking about how he wishes people were more empathetic. And if you look at that completely void of context, I would kind of, and I do have some degree. I'm not a completely unempathetic person, so I do have some degree of, I don't know, I don't take joy in seeing this man in anguish. Yet at the same time, if you watch that actual interview, 1 minute, literally 1 minute before they have that discussion, they're talking about Jessica Yaniv. And Jessica Yaniv, I forget because we talked. It might have been pre-show, but we at some point we talked about Jessica Yaniv. It may not have been during this live conversation.
So let me mention that real quick. So having no problem. So basically, before the show, we were we just doing introductions, and one of the things we were talking about how certain individuals are using these one-off nut-picked examples to represent the entire demographic of a political circle or political spectrum or social advocates in general. And it's one of the worst form of logical fallacies and dishonest forms of discourse that you could ever do. But go ahead, please continue, Vadim, if that kind of...
Absolutely. And so Jessica Yaniv is someone who I literally have not seen one person in the LGBTQ community stand up for, who has not denounced them and said, like, this is kind of a garbage person. Inside the context of this conversation that they were having, he used Jessica Yaniv as an example of why he was right about Bill C-16. But it doesn't validate him in the slightest, because Jessica Yaniv's case was dismissed. And, you know, in that case, what was, I believe, a kind of, what would you call it? There's a word that's not coming to me, but just an improper use of the bill. It was not successful. And really the important thing that occurred inside this conversation is that as they were talking, but both he and the host, they mentioned Jessica Yaniv, and they were like, okay, you know, like, I believe we can call him he. And look, I'm sorry, Jessica Yaniv may be a horrible person, but at the same time, they don't deserve to be misgendered. It's to me, it's the same thing as if, you know, like O.J. Simpson, horrible human being. But imagine like calling him an N-bomb and thinking that that's okay because of what it's like. When you do that, you don't only degrade the person that you're talking about, you're degrading like an entire people, you know, an entire class of people. So, you know, I have no respect for Jessica Yaniv as a person, yet at the same time, I don't think that taking like joy in not that they weren't dead naming her, but misgendering her is really shitty.
Yeah,
so
if I can just add on to that, and I've seen this perpetuated from people like Blair White, Rosa Dawn. See, I'm very vocal on my opposition to them when it comes to the idea, not them as individuals, but their ideology and their ideals, because it's incredibly problematic. And here's why I believe it's problematic. When you have individuals using this form of cherry picking or not picking of the general broader audience, it denotes their viewers to think that anytime we have an interaction with people with social advocate circles or the LGBT, then it automatically placates that conversations cannot be had on topics that we may disagree on. And that's a huge problem for me personally, because if I'm trying to have this discourse, if I'm trying to have discussions with people that I disagree with, I'm willing to listen to their position. And there's this certain narrative, as I think you mentioned earlier, of how certain individuals are just making this misnomer. Oh, we don't care about discourse. Oh, we just want to shut down discussion. When that's not really the case for the majority of individuals. It's just when the opportunity arises for such discussions to be had, we get a lot of the times in where people will just say, "Oh, you're just an SJW," or "You're just a woke person. We don't give a crap about what you say." I get that all the time. But I want to give everyone else a chance, because there is another topic I want to bring up that is in relation to this. But please go ahead, guys.
I wanted to say that it's mostly that I agree with Vadim, but like also not to go too centrist on this, but like I do see this on the left with, you know, people focusing on like Trump's weight or something, or you know, other characteristics like that.
I agree with you.
I'm sorry, Trump's weight. That's like complaining. That is really just like saying that the real problem with ISIS is that their hummus is too moist.
I think that if that's like your constant criticism of Trump, then there's something wrong there. But I don't think that there's something inherently wrong with pointing it out because of the fact that he is very hung up on people's looks, and it constantly makes degrading comments about people in all sorts of ways. So, pointing out that he is not by any means a perfect human specimen, I don't think that in itself is bad.
Well,
but I get what you're saying. You don't want that to be like the go-to criticism.
Well, also, I don't like the idea of furthering that attitude. It's sort of like saying, like, if someone calls you dumb in high school and you're just like, well, you're an idiot, like, that doesn't further anything.
Doesn't further conversations. Yeah, I think for me, and tell me if I'm wrong, guys, you guys can disagree with my take on this, because I try to take everyone's perspective and kind of sum it up to one. But I think it comes to the context of the actual critique. So, for example, if you hear Trump criticizing a person based on their appearance, and then for example, if Trump is called Rosie, what was he calling Rosie O'Donnell? He was calling her something about her weight, wasn't she? Or wasn't he? Yeah, a cow or something like that. And it's kind of like a form of hypocrisy. So if someone does a form of critique on Trump doing that same thing, I get what you're saying, Vadim. Now, but when it comes to, like, I also agree with Alex here, because there are contexts, there's times and where I've seen individuals attack Trump, and when there's a whole other things to attack Trump on, they focus on this one thing. And and if you do that, it's, again, it just gives people bad optics in regards to you not willing to address his points. And
it's sort of like, I'm sorry, I have a lot to say about it. So, it has to do with exactly what you're saying. Let's say that someone, a popular Republican, who has like a history of being anti-LGBT, comes out and is found in like some airport restroom getting having some sort of sexual God, I'm sorry, I'm a little inarticulate at this moment. Getting a fucking blowjob from another guy. Okay, trying to be diplomatic about it, but I'm just going to be crass.
You can be as vulgar and crass as you want. We have no filters there. Sir.
So yeah, let's say that occurs. That's different than, say, chastising Pete Buttigieg for being gay, because there's no hypocrisy with Pete Buttigieg and his homosexuality. He is always been very open about it, and there are certainly in my opinion, a great deal of worthy criticisms of him as a politician, but that is not one of them. I wouldn't say that criticizing criticizing a Republican for being gay is really the point. It's just kind of pointing out that hypocrisy. And my entire reason for bringing up the situation that I did with Jordan Peterson is that was a situation in which one moment he was being both spreading disinformation and acting in a way in which people who look at that and see him as a good example, they will have incentive to be degrading to trans people and non-binary people in general. And then literally 1 minute later, he is asking for sympathy. Now, okay, maybe he deserves some level of sympathy. Maybe there are some people out there who are really crossing the line in the way that they are interacting with him, but it's just sort of like you can't help but notice that hypocrisy pointed out. I think it's helpful to point it out.
Playing the victim.
Yeah, but yes, absolutely. And that's another aspect of Jordan Peterson, that he constantly refers to left wing. The left wing as victim culture. So that's another apt reason why you would want to point something like that out.
But real quick, I want to give everyone a chance. So I thank you real quick. Christy, Perfect. Did you guys have anything you wanted to mention real quick? And or Alex?
I do. I was gonna start with a joke, but reading 12 Rules for Life was one of those great times where I liked being postmodern with death, and I could just the death of the author was never sweeter.
Oh, real quick. Again, I just mentioned this real quick. Isn't it ironic? Here's the thing I really find ironic, and I have to mention this before I forget. That you hear Jordan Peterson all the time talking about postmodern Marxism, yet his philosophy, his rhetoric is by default and by definition postmodern. Does anybody ever notice that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Completely.
Yeah, I've heard that bunch.
He deconstructs things all the time in a manner that is totally in line with the way that postmodernists. Well, I mean, I'm not saying he does it in the same exact way, but he does it to the same extent. Yeah, I mean, the man he's a weird guy because he's someone who is capable. He's not a total idiot. I won't say that. I think that he's capable on some topics of speaking very lucidly and having some opinions which are valid and worthwhile. And then sometimes he just starts talking like Deepak Chopra, and when he's just someone who, when he gets outside of his very narrow realm of expertise, he just has bad takes all over the place.
I agree. But Christy, I apologize. Please continue what you were saying. I apologize.
Oh no, that's fine. One of the things that will always happen is that people will take an example and make it universal. One of the things I hate, I mean, I truly hate, is when say a priest is shown to be gay and or having a gay affair, and they say, well, yes, all priests are like that, but there are two things that it's accomplishing. It's universalizing a specific, and then it's also putting the blame on of gayness. That's not the word I want. I'm having
homosexuality.
No, it's putting the blame also on the gays within the community, because I mean, I don't know. I've been to plenty of gay bars, and they're not quite dens of iniquity.
Understand. Real quick, so Perfect, did you have anything you want to reference to your own experience or own knowledge of Peterson that you've heard?
Well, reading the 12 Rules for Life, I did that in a book club, and it was a real amazing thing. It's a game changer. I was of the opinion that Jordan Peterson was said interesting things. I didn't agree with most anything he said, but that didn't change the fact that they were interesting. I watched his lectures both at Harvard and then at Toronto University. And having watched the lecture series, I felt that he was doing a lot of things that were challenging people by saying things that were inaccurate and things like that, where you're trying to get the students to come and join in and argue with you. And after doing the 12 Rules for Life, I found out that he's just bugger all insane. He's got problems. It's not that he's not smart. He's got real issues.
If I can just say something real quick, this is my own unique perspective, but I think Jordan Peterson, by every measure of evidence, is a grifter. Anyone here is more than welcome to disagree with my position, but I remember specifically, I don't know if you remember this too, Vadim, but there was a interview that Jordan Peterson did at Joe Rogan, and where he clearly says, I found a way to monetize SJWs. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a little out of context.
I
think more telling accurate in that interview is when he claimed, when he was talking about his all beef diet and said that he literally didn't sleep for, I think, 30 days straight because of the fact that he drank some apple juice, I believe.
Yeah.
He's very weird when it comes to, I mean, his current situation is evidence of that. When it comes to health issues, he's a little, I mean, I feel bad saying it because he's currently supposedly in a Russian hospital in a very bad state.
He's
but
actually out.
He's out? Okay,
He's out.
Good. I mean, I say good because in spite of the fact that I'm not crazy about the guy, I don't want him again to be in like physical pain or something like that. But yeah, that I he did say that, and I mean, come on, who believes that? Even if you're, it's not even within the realm of acceptable hyperbole to say that. You know, it was totally something that he was saying, I think, to give more credit to his daughter's diet, which is, as far as I could tell, totally fucking dangerous and no one should do it. But it's an all beef diet for anyone who's watching and doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, and I go ahead, please, Alex. Go ahead.
Okay, I just had two last things that I want to say about Jordan Peterson. That piss me off. One is he doesn't understand Crime and Punishment. I love the book Crime and Punishment. I genuinely do. And why does Jordan Peterson have to misrepresent a great novel? Two, Jordan Peterson's obsession with Jungian explanations for psychological reasoning. I've read Jung. I've read some of Jung, and the methods to the therapy that Jung helped perpetuate are genuinely helpful. And for him to take like the worst aspects of Jung and just like obsessively bring that out, just like annoy me to no end. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Well, he's trying to apply Peck to Jung, which is just it's not compatible.
So,
but that's a psychology thing, and I probably shouldn't. It would take too much explanation to get there.
So there is a topic that just to like move this on to another topic quick, but
Yeah.
this is actually an important topic personally for me because I recently did a whole deep dive into this. Vadim, I really want to ask you this: how much do you know about this discussion people are having of transgender individuals in prisons? How much do you know in regards to this?
I would say that I'm not completely well versed in the topic, but I do know that there are a lot of statistics that people are both misrepresenting.
Absolutely.
and then there are statistics that happen to be true but are explicable for certain reasons. I don't want to go that into it because I'd rather you talk about it because you seem to be more of someone with a bit of expertise on the topic.
I wouldn't say expertise, but
some. I would say that I've read up a little bit on it, but I don't feel comfortable kind of talking with authority about it.
Oh yeah, of course. So what I was going to mention is, there was this big talking point among certain individuals. They're talking about how there is a surplus of individuals who are currently identified as trans women, and I'm pretty sure have you guys generally heard that talking point?
Yeah.
You mean a surplus in our prisons, or
you're cutting out a bunch.
Your mic is breaking up.
Yeah, your mic is breaking up.
Hello.
It's breaking up, Vadim.
You're still muted.
Hello.
Yes. Okay. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah. So go. Like what I'm saying is what I've seen on this discussion is certain individuals are using this. So what I'm saying is these individuals are saying that a lot of individuals that are going into prison, that there's a lot more like people in prison, these individuals who are prisoners they are intentionally trying to represent themselves as trans women to get out or get lesser sentences or to get or lesser punishments. And one of the things I recently did was I did a reply to Buck Angel. Now we could have a discussion on that individual, but I know the eye roll there. But I actually did a reply to Buck Angel. So Buck Angel asked a question: why does it seem like there are more trans women coming out of prison? And I answered that question for him, and it's very simple. If you, the United States is horrible when it comes to statistics, when it comes to how many transgender individuals we have in prison and the demographics of trans men to trans women. But if you look at the UK, one of the things that this misnomer that people are using is that there are more trans women per capita than trans men, and that's just not the truth. If you look at the statistics based on the UK, there is 0.6% of the population who are trans men in the UK prison system in comparison to only 0.13% of trans women out of the entire demographic. Yet there's this misnomer that there are more trans women coming out in regards to their intrinsic identity than trans men, and it's just not true. And it's a boogie tactic, in my opinion. It's a scare tactic to push a narrative to speak against transgender individuals. But again, that's my perspective. But what do you guys think?
It's not. It's just as unsafe for a trans woman to be in
Absolutely
prison. This is the what do they call in philosophy? The problem of piles. How many grains of sand make a pile? Is the thought experiment, but so. Well, I had something really pithy here, but I'm not. Get back to me because I have thoughts on this.
No problem, Christy. Alex, Perfict, Fadine, did you guys have any takes on this topic at all, or probably not?
I don't really. I mean, I think that it's a. People always want to tie trans people to dubious things, to prisons, to being child molesters,
Yep.
and things like that, which they have no more propensity towards those things than cis individuals. And yeah, it's just a very predictable tactic that those who are opposed to trans rights and trans people in general will do. They'll tie them to anything that they can that seems creepy or bad.
Yeah. What about
Well-
you, Perfect? Did you have any take? Go ahead, Alex. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just to add a little bit to what Virginia was saying. I don't think it's necessarily fuck, what's the word? I don't think they're always necessarily trying to do it. I think I get the impression a lot of times it's because they don't understand, because it's the mysterious different thing. They're like looking for everything scary and bad to associate with the thing they don't understand.
Sure.
Kind of like a boogeyman.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I was saying earlier. There's sort of, or I forget if we said this in the pre-show or inside our discussion, but I think that there are gradients of different types of bigotry. There's gradients when it comes to transphobia, and sometimes it comes out of a real maliciousness and like an outright, so for lack of a better word, hatred. Yeah, I think that's a good word to use. And then sometimes it comes from a misunderstanding and maybe not just being familiar with the whole community. And these are people who, if they had a family member or more friends that were in these communities, they would change their mind, hopefully quite quickly. So is that what you're getting at there with what you had to say?
Yeah, that was in general what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to make sure like everyone gets a chance. So Perfect, did you have any take on this topic at all, or?
Well, I'd also point out that if they, as they contend, there are people posing as trans people in order to get easier time, that would be a significant indictment of the prison system.
Good point. Very good point. Perfect. What do you guys think on what Perfect just said? Do you think that's a pretty fair take? That
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would also put it the one thing I would say is if this were this statistic true, and we both know it's not, but trans people, if they're not safe to transition, if they're not good to transition, or just haven't figured out their identity, have a higher incidence of self-medicating, and self-medicating will often lead to criminal behavior. But that would be the first place I'd go, is why did this happen? Why is this happening? Which, that's a better explanation than they're just doing it to get easier time, which is not a thing. It's not true. I've seen Orange is the New Black. God damn it.
So I do want to mention that we're going the last 20 minutes of the show. So typically around the last 10 minutes, Vadim, we do promotion of you yourself and also the co-host, so everyone can share what they're going to be doing the next week. But one of the last things I wanted to approach is, since you have been very kind to be on the show, Vadim, is there anything that you would like to discuss or you would like to bring up yourself that you think that not many people are kind of going over, or not many people are bringing up in general discourse on any topic?
Well, there's so many things that I could jump to, but since it's sort of related to what we were talking about before, I think that you know, there's what you're saying, I think is not too far off from the talking point of, oh, there's way too many children being who are becoming trans these days, and the term transtrender is often used, and I think, I don't know, I think it's similar. I think it's a way that people who kind of have a negative bias or a negative connotation with trans people in general kind of use children as this fear-mongering tactic. And
well, let me ask you this real quick, Vadim, and it goes right into you're saying. I'm pretty sure you noticed this, but have you noticed that there are certain demographics of individuals that are using this talking point, that parents are giving their children hormones, and they're basically implying that they're not doing this with any form of medical supervision? Have you seen that form of rhetoric?
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of crazy just things that, I mean, maybe there might be some weird outlier situations where that rarely ever happen, where these things that they're talking about happen, although I'm even skeptical that that's true. But you'll see people who claim that the kids are making all the decisions, like why should we just allow like a 6-year-old to go on hormones? Well, they don't go on hormones. They are usually,
isn't it 16? Isn't it 16?
Yes, 16 is around the time that they legally are, as far as I understand, are able to take actual hormones. But when they're that age and they are diagnosed with dysphoria, I believe that the therapy that is recommended is for them just to express themselves, gender-wise, like dress and grow their hair out, or cut it, depending on what gender they identify as. And there are all these different ways that they also say that, like, they act as if 8-year-olds are getting genital surgery and things like that, when
yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, I mean, there are all these absurd misunderstandings. It's both misunderstandings and then purposeful misrepresentation. I mean, we've talked about Blair White, and she's someone who I think knows very well at this point that maybe there was a certain point where she didn't know, and it's hard to believe that, but maybe there was a certain point that she didn't know that certain things that she has propagated are untrue. But at this point, she's been amply refuted, and I refuse to believe that she doesn't know that she is propagating BS talking points. Of course, she's not the only one. There are tons and tons of people who do this. Graham Linehan, of course. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that
I've
heard
of him.
shit. And you know, they will just misrepresent how children are treated by the very last thing that I'll say is, because I feel like I should let others chime in, is that they for first and foremost, they misrepresent what the medical consensus is
Absolutely.
on these topics. You know, these they act as if there's more controversy over these things, and they act as if the presumptive or not presumptive, but just the consensus is that children should not have these sorts of therapies, the real therapies that they're actually getting. And you know, the overwhelming number of medical experts within these fields, endocrinologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, the not just the overwhelming number of of those individuals themselves, but like the leading bodies of experts. And by that I mean like the American Psychiatric Association. I forget what they're called, but there's one major body of pediatricians, and all of these people they endorse these. They endorse these therapies. They endorse both children expressing until around the Tanner stage, and then if they've had lots of medical or lots of experts kind of diagnose them, then moving on to possibly puberty blockers at like the what they call the Tanner stage. And a lot of people misrepresent those drugs as being drugs that can like chemically castrate you or some shit like that, when they're totally reversible. That's the, you know, there's lots of decades of testing on this stuff.
If I can just bounce on what you're saying.
Yeah,
here,
I'm sorry. I'm saying a mouthful. I'm sorry if I'm kind of over talking.
No, you're not. And I agree with you.
It all pisses me off, you know. Well, I mean, it pisses me off for two reasons. I'm sorry. I know you want to jump in, but I just need to say that it pisses me off for two huge reasons. One, because of course these are children. These are therapies that will reduce self-harm and suicide, and have been shown to increase well-being. And so I care from that standpoint, because I care about kids and want the best outcomes for them. But then it also just pisses me off from the standpoint of somebody who cares about like truth, you know, about like what happens to be like factual and accurate. And just these people miss the marks on all those, in all those ways.
Yeah, so what I was going to bounce on, this is kind of going in what I am also very upset by this, and this is the major factor for me. And this is, for my own personal perceptions, a form of hypocrisy that's demonstrated. These individuals that make these talking points claim that our perspective, social advocates, are the ones that are denying biology, are denying science. Yeah. If you actually look at the consensus on this discussion, we're not talking about just the US. We're talking about the UK, Canada, and the UN in itself have literally stated these points that you just mentioned, how this is appropriate care to relieve suffering on these type of children. And these people are the ones that are actually denying the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community on this topic. And that's the one thing that bugs me the most, is this blatant hypocrisy in relation to this. I don't know why they do it. I have my implications, but go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was going to say what bugs me the most is that they are so bad at biology. Like, so bad. Like, I mean, as soon as you bring up Apparently, I forgot my biological terminology. Fuck, it's been too long since molecular biology. The fact that certain genes are activated by hormones and numerous other things, and there are numerous things that affect what genes are activated. So like, it's not, you can't just simplify things to X and Y and like that sort of attitude at all.
Isn't that, Alex, real quick, isn't that based on the receptors? Is that correct? I don't know too much. Just wondering, isn't that?
It's based on. There are a bunch of factors, and some of them are outside of my knowledge. But
Gotcha.
So in general, obviously, the thing I think about the most is type 2 diabetes. Like, you aren't born with it, but it can activate if certain things get overloaded, and then the body produces stuff, and basically certain other genes are activated. Mad cow disease is actually a good thing, because that's kind of what a lot of prions do, is they're just like, I'm gonna fuck with this one protein, and then it's more stable. I don't know, I'm probably giving a bad explanation. I'm not.
It's cool, but real quick, so we can do the wrap up. Perfict and Christy, do you guys have any takes on this in reference to this, so I can give you guys an opportunity to?
Well, the puberty blockers still kind of give me the willies, as I don't understand how they work and how they have so little other effects. They have so few. There's no problems with them.
Well,
and that always makes me feel suspicious. But I also have to accept that the medical community these are people who want to help people. That's why most of them got into the job.
Yeah.
You can't, that I have to accept that they know more than I do.
Yeah. I will say there's only one particular puberty blocker I can think of that has potential negative consequences if you take it for more than longer than puberty.
Yeah, that I can believe that. But my point is, it's just the whole it sounds too good to be true.
Oh, and yeah, sometimes that happens though.
First blush, but you go, sometimes things are really good.
Yeah, like my first time taking Zoloft, I had almost no side effects. I'm just like, well, this is working out well for me. Anyway, sorry.
Can I mention one thing?
Go ahead, Vadim, please.
Sure. Just this is something else that annoys me to know, and it's one of the most basic, and it might be the most go-to example of the way that these people will misrepresent the left and say like, oh, they're so crazy, they don't believe in basic science, and it's right in the beginning of that, is it Ariel Scarcella's, is that her name?
Yeah.
Most recent video, she starts by saying like, I'm a lesbian and I believe that there are two genders. And
I have to paraphrase. She said that she doesn't believe that gender is a social construct.
Okay. So yes, so she says that. Okay. Well, very commonly people will act as though when people are talking about the fact that there are that the gender is not a what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that a lot of people act as though the thrust of people's conversation who advocate for trans people is that that there isn't such a thing as sexual
characteristics.
Exactly, sexual characteristics, when there's just a difference between
gender and biological sex.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry.
These
terms
if I can just say this real quick, Vadim, and this is one of the questions I did a video response to Ariel in reference to this, and I asked her a very specific question. I doubt she's ever replied, but I would love to answer someone who denies that gender is a social construct. Ask them a simple question. Can you give me the biological characteristics or the biological nature of a dress? Can you give me the biological characteristics of earrings, makeup? Why is it? Are you saying that these things are innate in nature? If that's their talking point, then they would have to provide some rational justification of how these things are innate in our reality in regards to nature, and that's a huge stretch for me. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm willing to accept that there maybe are certain things that possibly genetically that people have a propensity towards, but I don't know. I think most of these things are certainly just ingrained in us from
Upbringing.
the way the upbringing. I mean, I believe that I've read that, and this is probably something that you guys know about, but I've heard that it, like, as short a time ago as maybe like the early 1920s, maybe the 1800s, the standard colors that people would use for their children's bedrooms, it was actually pink
Polar
for
opposite.
boys. Yeah, it was pink for boys
Yeah.
and blue for girls.
Yeah. You will actually
And-
see boys wearing dresses. See, this is actually my forte. So if you actually look at the context of cultural history in the 1800s, especially during the Wild West, it's very customizable for you to see little children, especially little boys, wearing dresses by every measure of standard of the culture at the time.
Yeah.
They were wearing dresses. And the reason why is clothing was a hard thing to keep in task, because if you had a set of clothing would have to last you for years upon years, and they would pass down these clothing to the children, and they would say, why am I going to buy or craft a whole set of clothing when I have already baby clothes that a little boy can wear right now? And that's exactly the reasons why that you saw little boys in dresses.
My grandfather lived to practically 100 years old. He's passed away, but he lived a good long life. All of the pictures that we have of him from his toddler years, he's to about like 5 years old, he's wearing a dress.
Well, no, if I can just mention one thing real quick, Vadim, and this is something you may not know, but if you go to Samoa, I don't know if you know much about like the cultural implications of gender in different around the world, but one of the fascinating things is, like, there was a recent tweet by Zuby. I don't know if you know who that individual is.
Yeah, he's a real
we won't go there, but he made a comment that supposedly when it comes to women, they're supposed to have long hair. And I asked him a very simple question. So are you going to apply that standard to the Samoans? Because in Samoa, prior to the 1830s, it was actually considered more masculine to have longer hair, and then women were supposed to have short hair. That's actually the standards of the culture until Christian missionaries came into the 1830s that completely changed their culture. So that it's ironic how these people will deny the social implications of standards of each culture in regards to their concepts of gender, and they think everything's been completely westernized. They just, I don't know, I don't understand why it seems that they ignore these concepts in history and in society. I don't get that, but who knows?
I mean, there's so many amazingly attractive actresses who have done roles or gone long periods of time with short haircuts, and somehow I doubt that Zuby would if he was in a room with them, would deny that they are attractive. But anyway, that's I don't know, maybe I'm kind of getting a little off topic there.
Yeah, but go ahead, please.
One of the things when they say two quick things when they say it's a denial of basic biology. First of all, your brain is part of your biology, which I'm sure I've said this on here before, but and the second, the gene expression. Most people don't know their chromosomes. I mean, I bet people would be surprised if everybody got their chromosomes tested.
Yeah, testing.
I mean, I turned out to be XX, so. And
she has a fascinating story, Vadim, if you ever get a chance to talk to her about it. Her story is fascinating, seriously. But real quick, guys, I want to make sure we get everyone the opportunity, because I want to do the wrap up. I greatly appreciate the open discussion we've had. So, Vadim, since you've been incredibly grateful. I'm very grateful, and so I'm pretty sure everyone else
Yeah.
for you showing up the show. I would love to give you the opportunity to ask: are you working on anything that you want to promote, or are you working what's like the next video or anything like that, or that you want to you can mention?
I mean, we have a few videos coming up that I'm excited about. One is a Mike Bloomberg meme review.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm by no means a Mike Bloomberg fan. I don't know if anyone genuinely is who hasn't been paid to be. But we have that video coming up, and then we have a video that has to do with kind of right-wing chud reactions to the Watchmen, both the Watchmen comic and the Watchmen series on HBO. I happen to be kind of a comic book nerd, so there were a lot of hot takes from those people, and people who are supposedly fans of the comic yet don't seem to grasp any of its socio-political underpinnings.
Remind me real quick, Vaneem, didn't you make I'm sorry if my memory's shortened, but I remember you did a video and where you actually mentioned a small piece of this, and where you referenced how when this individual, I don't remember, I think it was a quartering, or I don't remember who, but you brought up like they were talking about this comic and it was supposed to be representing a storyline or something, and then you actually showed the actual comic book and what it actually happened. I don't remember what it was, but I remember you did something like that not too long ago. I watched that video.
Yeah, we did a video on right-wing reactions to, I mean, overall, it's actually one of my favorite videos that we've done in the recent past. Overall, it explored the concept of forced diversity, which is a term which is a term that I do not use. I think it's kind of a chud term, but there are all these kind of anti-SJWs who make this claim that Hollywood is forcing diversity on us, and most of these people, I mean, some of these people are straight up racists. I will say that, but I think most of them probably aren't. They just kind of parrot racist talking points. I mean, certainly when they're talking about forced diversity, they're doing work. They're basically helping out the alt-right and stuff like that, because it's straight out of their playbooks, terms like that.
Do you generally agree that a lot of these individuals that are making these talking points about this forced diversity, it doesn't it, I don't know, but maybe you disagree with this, but it seems in my opinion they are automatically hand-waving the possibility that this is just corporations trying to take advantage of a certain concept currently happening in culture? Well,
it's partially that. I mean, within the video I make the point that I think that, because while not being a capital L lefty, I don't consider myself either an anarchist or a communist right now. But in spite of that, I'm not a huge fan of capitalism. I certainly recognize that there's a lot of shortcomings of capitalism and a lot of ways in which capitalism creates very exploitative situations. And I actually think that diversity within our programming, maybe that's the bad word, in our entertainment, I think that is one of maybe
I think it's realistic.
Maybe it's totally realistic, but maybe I'm kind of using, maybe there's more than I'm saying here, but
of course.
Well, I guess the way that I put it in the video is it's one of the few genuine good things that have come out of capitalism. The fact that there is an incentive for corporations, because I don't think that, I do think that the artists that are creating this stuff, like the directors, the writers, I think for the most part, these are pretty left-wing people who do want to be inclusive. They do genuinely like it. But when it comes to the producers, they don't give a shit. The only color that they care about is green. They care about money. And it's just, it's very fortunate that we are at a point in in a human history where in terms of entertainment, these things are more profitable for these companies, and they don't want to accept that. They don't want to accept that that's the case. And but just to finish, because I kind of got in the weeds there talking about that one video, we also have an interview with Sam Cedar of the Majority Report.
Can I ask when that's going to happen, Vadim? Do you have any word?
I mean, we're
on the time.
I'm talking, and I have to roll. I hate it. I think, and of beginning of, and then and this is the last is for those who don't know.
Oh, there's a lot of cutting out on my end.
Okay.
Because I caught you clearly. So can I ask real quick, what was the name of the show that you're going to be hosting, Vadim? Can you mention that?
Well, it's still going to be on the Creationist Cat channel.
Gotcha.
I kind of, I mean, I know what I'm going to change the name of the channel to, but I kind of want that to be a surprise, so I don't really want to divulge that.
I understand.
But I mean, the last thing I'll say is that CC will still make appearances here and there, and you know, I've made several videos that are very popular on my channel alone, so it will kind of build on that sort of material. But we'll be doing different things, kind of experimenting a little bit, yet at the same time it will still have the trademark look and sense of humor that, I don't know, the Creationist Cat has in general. I think it's not going to be such a departure from the channel that anyone who enjoys Creationist Cat shouldn't enjoy those videos as well.
Gotcha. I just have one question, last thing. Any word on a possible Soy Boy Part Deuce ever coming out, or any idea if that would ever come in the future potentially?
A what?
The Soy Boys Part Deuce or Part 2? Like a
did I make a video called Soy Boy?
Not Soy Boy. What's the name? You guys did a show that only lasted one episode. I'm sorry.
The Gotcha Boys. The Gotcha Boys.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm all for doing another episode of the Gotcha Boys. We had kind of a little bit but Dusty and I mean, I think we're all on good terms. I don't know Tim, who is someone who he was the third member of that group.
I haven't heard from him in a while, to be honest.
Yeah, he's been a little off the grid, and I'm not sure if he's very interested in being very online. So I'm all for it. I think the easiest thing to do would just be to have an informal Gotcha Boys
kind of like this
reunion on Dusty's podcast.
Yeah,
because the reason why that didn't work out is because I wanted to create a very unique podcast experience. I wanted it to be very visual, and it ended up being an exceptional amount of work, and there was no way that I could really do that while maintaining Creationist Cat and, you know, making money and all of that. So
the one thing I wanted to say is I'm very pleased at least that the way it ended up generally amicable. That's the one thing I'm very content with, that when I saw this whole situation happen. So I don't know if that's maybe not your same review on what happened, but that's what I saw. That it kind of at least you got part of it down.
That's where we're at now. There was a little bit of static in the beginning of it dissolving. I mean, the whole thing was kind of a clusterfuck, and I put most of that clusterfuckness on me because I had this, like, basically a computer situation that made I mean, we weren't able to get it off the ground for months when it should have been way sooner than that. And it was because I was having these weird computer problems. It's not worth going into for very long. It's not going to be interesting to your audience.
Of course not.
But I'm glad you enjoyed. I'm glad you enjoyed those. I enjoyed.
I'm just fascinated what would have been if you guys if it actually did continue. I'm always curious. That's all. So
yeah, I would have liked to have been in a situation where we continued it, because again, there were people who watched it and they were like annoyed by the very visual aspect of the podcast, and I guess that defeats the purpose of a podcast. But what the reason why I wanted to do it to begin with is because I wanted to make a podcast that had a visual element to it that really that gave people an element that they don't normally get with podcasts.
You can't really do that with the podcast. I mean, it's not really accessible to be able to do like the graphics and the presentation you're talking about in such a format. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we would have had to have had, if we had had a tremendous right off the bat Patreon donations, then we would have been able to make it work. But yeah, but then even then, I think it would have had to have been my main thing. And even though that I really enjoyed doing it, I don't want to sacrifice doing my own material for that. So it was a learning experience. And the bottom line is that I have a lot of respect for Dusty and Tim, and I think we're all on decent terms. So.
Exactly. That's all that matters in the end, for my opinion. So glad that happened. So really real quick. So Christy, do you have anything working on this next week? Any new interviews or anything coming up?
I don't actually have an interview for this week, which is upsetting. But
do you want me to be on? Like, I'm always open for an interview.
Well, I just interviewed you recently, so
yeah, I know.
Diversity is good.
I might call on you for that. I mean, I'll have Vadim on at some point during March, because there we go. I've just locked him into it.
I'm down. Sure, why not?
Most of what I have going right now, I'm still working on the Star Trek script. Of all things, The Man Trap is one of the hardest ones to write about. I've got the scripts for the next 3, but the very first one is just I have a good joke at the beginning. But most of what I'm doing right now is real world stuff. I have a short story coming out in a trans benefit anthology, which has a pretty big name as its lead story, so we'll get some sales.
Awesome.
Still performing at the Planned Parenthood benefit on the 14th.
I still want a live recording, Christy. You come on.
If I have one, it's going to be posted. Trust me.
Awesome.
And that's about it. I'm working on. I've been sick this last couple weeks, so I took last week off, which I don't like to do, but I couldn't do anything.
Well, I hope you feel better, Christy. We all do. Hopefully, for the sentiments we've shared. So.
Oh yeah, and I'll find somebody will be on. We'll deal with it.
Real quick, so Perfict, did you have anything you got going on this week, or you want to mention, or no?
Thought I'd mention the Rumpus Room, my Discord.
Go for it. Of course, go for it.
Just that it's a atheist haven, and very non-binary friendly.
And I will be happy to share that after this video goes live in the description tab below. So I'll put that underneath Perfict's section. That good for you, Perfict?
Yes.
Awesome.
Please.
Of course. And real quick, so Alex, anything working up this week, or?
Okay, a couple things. So hopefully I'll get the video I have just talking about my views on the most recent Counterpoints video.
I saw your ice video, by the way. It was really well done.
Thank you. So hopefully I can get that done, and then I really need to. It's filmed. I just need to edit it. And on the 6th at 11 p.m. Eastern, I should be on the Left Thinking podcast.
The Left Thinking. If you have that information, I can also put that in the description tab for you, Alex, so I can put down the information, like you're going to be on the show at what day, and I'll be able to put it down there so anybody who hears it can go onto that link onto the show for you, okay?
Sure.
Cool. Do you have anything else, Alex? Or like you also do D&D on Twitch, right?
Oh yeah, and they are slowly inching towards the potential potentially finding the artifact they're looking for. So hopefully they'll solve the problems that are going on in the world, or who knows what will happen.
And they can catch you on Saturdays at 6 on that, correct?
At 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, if it just to keep time zones consistent. Like, I know I'm on Central time zone, but like Eastern Pacific are the most commonly talked about, so it's the easiest for people are more used to having to switch from those.
And real quick, before we head off, I want to ask this to respect, because I apologize, I didn't ask this at the very beginning, Vadim. Do you have Twitch? Do you use Twitch at all, or are you streaming there at all?
Not currently, but okay. I plan on making a Twitch channel at some point once I do the rebrand thing.
Yeah, so at a future day, if you ever want me to, just feel free to contact me. I'll be once you have that time come up, I'll be happy to put it in the description tab for you as well, so anybody who watches this at a future later date can go directly to it. Okay, Vadim? Just wanted to bring that up. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for the discussion. Thank you so much, Vadim, for being on our show. We've covered a lot of topics, and everyone check out Vadim's channel. Again, the information in the description tab below. And everyone say goodbye, and thank you so much for watching, guys.
Later. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to end soon.
When Vadim, the time we actually talked about you coming on my channel, we were on Justin's Discord and trying to discuss Derrida with him.
Right.